When he blows this up in here, we'll have a major piece of this architecture drop away. It won't be like the telescope's crushing its way through it. It'll be like it's shattered and it's already frozen, so it's already fragile.
It isn't whether or not I'm noted for the flawless execution of my effects. It's whether or not the effects elicited the response in the audience that was necessary for the story.
We'll shoot Batman going into the top of the Freeze-mobile, and then we'll do the split of the car and it opening up to reveal the rocket. At that point, we have the option of having the door in the rocket, whatever that door is, closed or open, and then we can do Batman entering with the rocket elevated, and you'll have it both ways.
John and I worked incredibly closely. He would call me up and say, come down, take a look at the miniatures, you know, the building of all the miniatures. By that one, there was so many new things to add. Besides Poison Ivy, growing things was Mr. Freeze stuff, and it became huge on that one, which is why we all started even earlier and working together. But incredible. I mean, Dykstra's incredible.
What happens with visual effects is this. You talk about it a lot, but then they go off and do some voodoo, and then they bring you the voodoo, and then you work on the voodoo with them, but then they go off and perfect the voodoo, and then it comes back to you. So how he actually did the process, he would have to share with you.
We create three-dimensional models, very simple models, in a computer, and we make motion control moves, meaning we track the camera, it's pan, roll, pitch, and linear motions in CGI. And those become the model for the actual photography, in this case, of miniatures.
Behind us is the miniature of Gotham City, and it's built in 1/24th scale. There's probably 20 different buildings. Many of them are modular in fashion. We have them on wheels so we can move them around the set, rearrange them for different shots, so that the same 20 buildings can be used to represent hundreds of buildings throughout Gotham City.
Camera's coming backwards, late.
When you're photographing in motion control, oftentimes you photograph it at a very slow speed, sometimes 2 frames a second. So the only way to see it in real time is to capture it on computer devices such as this, which is called a PAR board. And basically, frame by frame, each image is recorded and it plays it back, or the computer plays it back. We use color video taps so we can get an indication of what the color is like, and even though it's not exactly true to the film, it gives a good idea of what you've got.
Barbara Ling, Bob Ringwood, all of these guys who in their own rights had done lots of stuff were being brought together and asked to work together in a place where his costumes had to be reproduced both in CGI and in reality, and her sets had to be reproduced in CGI and reality and in miniature. So it was like all of a sudden there's all of this overlap of requirement, and communication was critical.
What we have here is actually a shot that combines quarter-scale miniatures, a 60 by 40 translite photographic backing, some live-action green screen characters, and a CG character on a CG motorcycle. And it'll all come together in the final movie to look like a real scene in Gotham, and it will be indistinguishable as to which is which. The city is quarter-scale, the Batmobile is quarter-scale miniature, the characters are obviously live-action, with people standing here and over here who are live-action green screen characters. The photographic backing is the city in the background, and the Robin on the motorcycle riding by is a computer-generated character.
This is the skyboard sequence, and it's been pre-visualized before we start our photography. You really get a sense that you're just in the film, and you're falling and falling and falling and falling as the characters are. You, the audience, is falling as well, and so it's got a lot of dynamics to it. So what we have on the Moviola is the miniature photography that is our version of what you saw in the computer world. And so this is taking the data that the computer created and then tweaking it and working with it, because on a live stage it's a little different than what the images are in the computer world, but basically it's taking the intent of that move and creating it as these background plates. And this photography will then be scanned and taken back to the computer world, and then Mr. Freeze will be, and Robin and Batman will be placed in here. Also, we'll have some smoke that is coming out of the stacks and a lot of other enhancements that create a lot more texture to this sequence.
You had to either design a camera that traveled at the speed of light and stopped in 3 feet, or you had to design a rig that could do motion control at 30 miles an hour, or there was all of this technology involved. When the ability to create images in the digital environment, a pixel at a time, arrived, suddenly that engineering side started to drop away. And it dropped away fairly quickly as the digital environment matured. And it also meant, from a supervisor point of view, it got to be much less an engineer and much more a designer, much more involved in what the content was rather than what the process was to create that content. That's a huge change. And that happened right in there between those two movies.